Hello everyone, this is Tom from Los Angeles and welcome back to Inferno. Today I'm going to talk about the 21st canto of Dante's Inferno, which is a canto I love. It's extremely dynamic, very funny, very fast-paced and clever, and very clever. To put a frame around this particular canto, first of all, as we have already commented for the last couple of cantos, there is a sensible, visible lowering of the register of the language. In fact, even more than the previous two cantos, into a language that is low and into a kind of humor that is low. In this sense, we can consider the 21st canto as a comedy, as a commedia, in the modern, not only in the modern sense, but also in the modern, more vulgar sense. If we think about really bad mainstream slapstick comedy movies, in this sense. So that's what Dante wants to achieve with this particular canto. In the 21st canto, the Barrattieri are punished in the fifth pouch or fifth ditch of Malevolge, and the Barrattieri are fundamentally corrupted politicians or corrupted civic servants, somebody who is supposed to do the collective good, but they are simply buying favors, selling favors, and exchanging the public good as if it was a matter of trade. Also, one of the reasons why Dante chooses to increase so much the humor in this canto, and in the next one, and in this couple of cantos now, 21st, 22nd, maybe a little bit of 23rd as well, somebody said it might be also because of the dark intensity of what is to come. The final cantos of Inferno are really terrible, and so knowing that, he might have wanted to balance them out with a little bit more lightheartedness in these cantos here. The action, as I said, is very dynamic. It's very theatrical. It reminds of a theater comedy, a theater production that is made in order to make people laugh. And it's a play. We can look at the 21st canto as the beginning of an isolated narration or a play, a theatrical play, that can be segmented in 4 acts, and that starts in canto 21st and ends around the beginning of the 23rd canto. So it's a very long narrative segment, probably the longest one in Inferno, that carries through very quickly and very dynamically. And then, as a fourth overall comment about this particular canto, it's not only it's a bolgia or a ditch that reminds us of comedy in our modern sense, but it's also reminding us of hell, in the sense that, let's say, in the typical concept of hell that it was in the Middle Ages during Dante's times. From a visual standpoint, in this canto we finally see hell as we would be expecting it in the Middle Ages, with actual proper devils and demons and pitchforks and pitch and black pitch. So again, it's a really fun canto, but I'm going to try to highlight a couple of points and techniques that Dante is using to subliminally draw us in. In fact, from the very first lines. It is the second and last time that he is mentioning the genre that his poem is, commedia, and he's linking this to the considerations that he was making in the previous canto. And he's basically having a chat with Virgil that we don't have the privilege to know what the chat is about. So it's a little bit arresting when you read this, because what's the point in telling us that? But the point is that whether you realize or not, so even subliminally, you are drawn into this narration in a way that makes you feel more and more that what he's telling us is real, that what he's telling us is true. There is no, there are so many different ways in which Dante tries to, all across the Divine Comedy, tries to convince us that he's talking about something that is true, even if it has the face of falsity or face of fiction. Its non-fiction is real. It actually happened to him. And there we go. They get at the next circle, which is the fifth circle. Here from the third to the fifth terzina, there is a beautiful description of the Venetian arsenal during 1300, when in winter they had to repair and mend the boats, the ships, with particular pitch that was boiled, etc. So there is a visual reflection of what we're going to see in the ditch of hell. But there's also a good reason for Dante to show us all this port activity that seems to be working very actively and very positively together, because he's describing all the different activities. Somebody who is the hammers strike the prow and some on the stern, and this one make oars, all the different division of labor. The point of describing all these different roles is really for Dante to emphasize what something like civic collaboration can bring to the good things that people, when they come together and work together well, can achieve. So there is a perfect contrast, very stark contrast to what we're going to see in this small little hellish society that Dante created for this canto and the next couple of cantos. And Virgil at this point, and we can consider this, let's say, the beginning of the first act of 4 of this theatrical narrative or play. Watch out, he pulled me across towards him where I stood. They were chatting across this bridge, and when they are on top of the bridge, they finally look down. I turned my head like someone eager to find out, and sudden fear. He is seeing, hurrying from behind, up the rock, was a black demon. Over one shoulder he had thrown a sinner, carrying both haunches' weight. Another thing which is pretty typical of representations of hell in painting and literature, I think across the Middle Ages, but in particular during Dante's times, is focus on culinary matters and items and elements, cooking verbs, terminology that refers to boiling, cooking, and I think somebody that I am exchanging comments in these videos also made a very good comment talking about the cooking related terminologies that very often Dante uses, and that's not only Dante, but I understand it was something fairly typical in those times when thinking about hell and inferno. So this damned soul that this demon is carrying on his shoulder is carried just like a piece of meat, just like a butcher would be carrying a piece of meat or a piece of flesh on his shoulder. Reaching our bridge, he spoke, "O Malebranche." Malebranche is the name of the gang of devils. Here is another one of Santa Zita's elder, Santa Zita being from Lucca, and so here he's talking about all condemned souls who come from Lucca, which is a Tuscan city. While I go back to bring more from his homeland, trusting below. His city gives us an abundant stock. Every citizen here except Bonturo practices barratry. It's already getting into the spirit of this play, satirical play, comedic play, because this is a joke. The devil is saying, everybody in Lucca is practice barratry, except for Bonturo, who was infamously a very popular, very corrupt leader of Lucca. I think he was one of the leaders between 1310 and 1315, around those times. But everybody knew that this guy was the most corrupted at all. So there is clear irony in this comment. Everybody except for him practices barratry. And given cash, they can contrive a yes from any no. Lovely in Italian how Dante expresses this. Del no per il denar vi si fa ita. The no through money becomes yes. Here's no place to show your sacred face. They are, the Santo Volto, the sacred face, is capitalized in the Italian as well. This is because he's referring to something that existed. It was a black wooden crucifix in a church in Lucca. So that's why he's capitalizing it. You're not out in the Cerchio for a swim. The Cerchio is the river in Lucca. So really, he's referring to very specific details about the city. And if you don't want to feel our hooks like this, then stay beneath the pitch. You need to stay below the surface, this poor soul. Now, what is happening? Dante is describing these condemned souls who have been sinning, who have been almost dedicating their life to corruption in their civic duties. We also need to remember something historically relevant, which is Dante's personal history. Dante was exiled from Florence. We know that. There was a false accusation. At least the majority of people believes that the accusation was false, of baratteria. He himself was accused of being a barattiere, or somebody who was in a high political charge or role and used it to just bring favors to himself. Now, the reason why most people really don't think that they had any fundament is because it was almost typical that every time the winning party or the winning faction came to power, especially in big cities like Florence, it was almost typical to accuse, from a juridical standpoint, to accuse the opponents of barratry and use this accusation as the legal ground to exile them, to kick them out. So this is really the juridical pretext they were using. Now, somebody actually commented that since Dante had been in politics for some time, he must have been part of the system himself, and whenever his part, which was the white Guelphs, were in charge, it's possible that they did something similar to their opponents. It's not completely clear, but there is a personal portion here that Dante is referring to. Then this first act of the play, as we can call it, ends with yet another culinary simile. And Dante says, then they did just as cooks have the scullions to steep the meat well into the cauldron, with a prop from their forks keeping it from floating up. It's a perfectly done and direct culinary simile. Very beautiful. From here we can say that the second act out of 4 starts because Virgil gets into action, springs into action. Find a place to hide because it's dangerous here for you. I'm taking care of you, Dante. Find a place to hide. No matter what offense they offer me, do not be frightened. I know how things are done here. Once before I was in such a fray. If you've read the Inferno until here, you know that this sentence from Virgil is probably far from reassuring for Dante, because Dante has already reminded him that he's not invincible with these demons, who already at the gates of this kicked him away, and he couldn't do anything against that, aside from waiting for divine intervention. And so where Virgil is referring here to once before I was in such a fray, it's not completely clear, but it can be only one out of two options, or even both of them. But it's either when he was in front of the city of this, the gates of this, or back many years before when he was escorted by Erechne down in hell. And even this particular example would not be very reassuring for Dante, because it was tainted with black magic through Erechne. So Dante is not feeling great at this point. The devils bayed and rushed at him with all the rage and uproar of dogs. They tore from under the bridge and raised their forks at him. But he cried. Virgil here takes a very courageous, very superior stance. He is convinced that he can defeat these demons. Not so savage. Before you dare to touch me with your forks, choose one to come forward to hear me out. So they cry their leader's name, which is Malacoda. So Malacoda comes forward, and Virgil addresses him. Do you, Malacoda, think I could get through all of your defenses safely as this, except by heaven's will and happy fate? It's a bit of a slightly more contorted version of Volsi così colà dove si puote. In other words, he is appealing to higher power. Now let us pass, for heaven also decrees that I should show another this savage road. At this point, Malacoda's reaction is very humble. He understands the demon's pride fell so much, he let loose his hook, he drops his weapon, and he says, no one strike him, everything is good. But we need to remember that we are in the circle of fraudulence, and we need to remember that these are demons, right? To me, my leader called, now you may come back safely to my side, you who crouch squatting behind the splinter shield. At this, Dante says, I stirred and quickly joined him, and the devils milled towards us, pressing forward. This scene reminds Dante of another time in his life when he attended a battle, and right after the battle, this was a 1289 battle against Pisa. The Pisani, people from Pisa, were in the castle of Caprona, that is mentioned here, and because they had surrendered, they made a pact with the attackers, the Florentines, that they would come out of the castle and nobody would attack each other. But obviously there was a lot of tension because everybody had weapons and they hated each other. So the simile is perfect for this situation. And Dante, in that particular context, was a cavalryman. He was on his horse as part of the army, as part of the delegation from Florence. And he kept as close. We can see already from the scene that Dante is certainly not convinced. He's still a little fearful. And we need to remember that the leader of these demons in the fraudulent circle is obviously a master of deceit. What are they cooking for Virgil and Dante? All the while I did not take my eyes away from their expressions, which were not good. They lowered their hooks, but I heard one give voice, should I just touch him on the rump? Again, comedy is funny. They taunt him, but in a very funny, light-hearted way. Yeah, go on and give him a cut. This would be very raucous and devil-like voices. But the demon who was talking with my guide, Malacoda, the leader, turned around instantly on hearing that, saying, hold on. To us, he said, you can go farther by this route. Now here there are 3 terzines where the demons, and Malacoda in particular, who's the leader, concocts a masterwork of deceit. He deceives Virgil and Dante, but mostly Virgil, by telling him a big lie masked behind a truth. In fact, he says something that is true, then something that is false, and then something that is true. We're going to see this in the next canto. So he says, you can't go farther by this route because along this ridge, the sixth arch lies all shattered at the bottom. And this is true. We know that the bridge fell after Virgil's first trip because that happened at Jesus Christ's death. So it was after Virgil's trip. So Virgil doesn't have a reason to not believe that because it was after. Then comes the falsity. But if you still wish to go forward, a ridge not far from this does have a place where you can cross at will. This is a big lie, although they don't know yet. And then something true again. It was yesterday, 5 hours later than now, that the 1266th year fell since the road here was ruined. This is a very precise, mathematically precise indication of time. Very important also for the interpreters of the Divine Comedy because it proves what the calculations that we are doing are, that we are in year 1300 and all the time, Dante is keeping track very, very precisely. In other words, 1266 years ago, yesterday, the day before of this day in this fiction, Jesus Christ died on the cross. And we also know the time because the Gospels, in most of them, the time of Jesus' death is indicated. In fact, it was midday, it was noon, even though in Luke's Gospel, it says that the sky became dark and the veil of the temple opened, cut in two, and then Jesus died only at 3 p.m. These are the clear indications on the Gospel. In fact, that's the Gospel of Luke. I checked because I really didn't remember. And in Matthew's Gospel, for example, it's indicated as Matthew 27. From noon on, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. And about 3 o'clock, Jesus cried with a loud voice, Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani, which is, my God, why have you forsaken me? And he died. So that's the Gospel. In fact, in Mark, more or less the same is repeated. And maybe a little strangely, in John, which is the most philosophical and most ethereal and theological of the four Gospels, we have the most graphic description of Jesus' death, with the description of the breaking of the legs of the other two condemned and the water coming out because of the spear. But there is no indication about the time in John's Gospel. So this is to say that Dante, whenever he wants to force something on even sacred texts, he just does it. He just goes ahead. So he's considering noon, the time when Jesus died and this big earthquake came and shook the entire inferno and hell, therefore breaking down some of his features, including the bridges. So this is a introduction of this gang of devils with very funny and and extremely devilish names. There's a pools of boiling tar. At this point, we have Dante realizing what Virgil has not realized, which is, I don't trust these people. That's what Dante is trying to say. I really don't trust these people. Oh me, oh master, what do I see? We need no escort if you know the road. Let's just go ourselves. We don't need these people to escort us at all. Just don't trust them. And this particular episode where Dante, on purpose, is showing us a credulous Virgil, or a Virgil who is explicitly shown as to make a real mistake in judgment is extraordinary. Is probably the only time that it's made explicit. Again, because of its, the message here is has all to do with reason. And so Dante is telling us about the limitations of reason. Not only that, he's also telling us about the limitations of somebody who doesn't know God, who's not allowed to know God and the truth under the Christian context. So in that situation, being an inhabitant of limbo, Virgil is not only precluded from knowing heaven and all the beauties of heaven, he also is precluded to properly understand evil, to properly understand the devilish ways, because the devil and the devils in general are also part of the Christian doctrine, and Virgil is missing that. It's very interesting. I tell you, have no fear. It is the wretches who boil here that they menace. So let them grind as fiercely as they like and scowl their worst. But this very funny finale of this act tells us clearly that they have a secret language, a secret signs to communicate with each other, that they are trying to trick, they are tricking Virgil and Dante. What better finale of this almost type of allegretto, opera buffa, if we think about this canto in musical terms, this really cheerful and very vulgar finale that is historic, because I remember in my Italian school as a kid, this is probably the favorite line in the entire Divine Comedy for young kids, right? Because they can laugh about it, hiding from the teacher, etc., etc. But it's so perfect for the type of expressive work that Dante is doing here. Very, very funny, brilliant, brilliant canto. And the next one is going to be along the same lines, along the same notes. So thank you, everyone, for watching these quick comments about the 21st canto. We will speak soon. Bye.